And other than the day, when do we celebrate the liturgy? Well, you may have heard of the liturgical year. This is a graphic depiction of the liturgical seasons. We celebrate the whole mystery of Christ from the Incarnation through Pentecost every year. Every Sunday is dedicated to some aspect of this celebration. The highlight, of course, is Easter. Everything is in light of the resurrection of Christ, which is Easter. But we begin, of course, with the Incarnation. Of course, the Incarnation appears back in here somewhere, the actual Annunciation, the day when Jesus was conceived in Mary's womb. And then the last 4 weeks is Advent, the time before Christmas. Christmas Day is not the Incarnation, it's actually the Nativity, the birth of Christ. But it's when he became present in our world in a visible way as a separate human being. Then we have a season called Christmas, which is usually maybe about 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, depending on how the Sundays fall. Then we have what we call ordinary time, which is not that there's anything bad about it, it's just that it's not one of the special celebrations, it's our life. Which, after a few weeks after Christmas, begins the Lenten season, which is the season of preparation for the celebration of Easter. It's a season of penitence, of reflection. As should Advent, it should be a quiet time, preparing our hearts for the great celebration to come. And Lent is even more of a penitential season than what we consider Advent to be. Lent actually ends on Holy Thursday evening when the Mass of the Lord's Supper is celebrated. And that Thursday, Friday, Saturday is what we call the Triduum. Actually, it's the evening of Holy Thursday, Friday, Saturday, right, the Triduum. 3 days. 3 days, 3 of the holiest days of the year, the most solemn days of the year. We are not obligated to attend any services during these 3 days, but if you really understand the significance and the meaning of them, you will be present at the celebrations, if at all possible. And of course, Easter. Easter is a season in itself. Easter is a week of weeks. It lasts for 7 weeks, from what we call Easter Sunday through what we call Pentecost. The entire mystery of Christ's life is celebrated. And then we go back to ordinary time until, once again, we begin with Advent. What else do we celebrate? Well, scattered among that calendar, scattered around among the liturgical year, we have memorials and feasts of many particular saints. Not every saint has their own day, but some of them share a day. Not every saint is necessarily named in the liturgical year, but the saints celebrating Mary and the other saints on fixed days of the year reminds us of their function in the church and their effect on our lives, and holds them up to us as models of holiness. They're human beings like us, and shows us that, yeah, they got there, we can too. It unites the church on earth with the liturgy in heaven. Another liturgy that is celebrated that not everybody is necessarily aware of, but I believe people are becoming more aware, is something called the Liturgy of the Hours. Every priest, deacon, bishop is required every day to pray this liturgy. Usually they do it on their own, although especially in monasteries and sometimes in convents, it is done in community, which is always the ideal way to celebrate any liturgy. It's a daily cycle of prayer, readings, and meditations. Sometimes it's called the breviary or the divine office. It's, as I said, required of ordained men. Some communities of nuns also are required to say these prayers daily. It's a way of sanctifying the day, uniting us to Christ. And because the prayers are to be said at certain hours, and of course we know about all the time zones of the world, it really does embody the words of Christ that says we should pray always. Somebody in the world is most likely praying the liturgy of the hours at every hour of every day. This prayer is being said somewhere in the world. This little graphic here shows you the traditional hours, and I don't mean 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. The hours weren't that precise and still are not. Here you see midnight, dawn, midday, and dusk. These are kind of the times of day that are being considered. And in the traditional old monasteries, for example, matins and lauds would be prayed before dawn. Prime would be prayed shortly after dawn, and then they would attend Mass. These other hours would be celebrated at their times, Vespers right as evening was falling, and Compline when you're going to bed, when you're ready to go to sleep. Many people celebrate some of these hours, the first one being prime, when you get up in the morning, then Vespers, evening prayer, Compline, night prayer. These are commonly celebrated, although the others are, of course, available, and they're available in many forms. Most people that celebrate the Liturgy of the Hours have a book of a shortened version or a set of books that have the complete version. And here you have a website that does the work for you. You don't have to figure out which prayer should be said on which day, which actually can be a little bit confusing at times. If you click on that link, you will be taken to their website, and you will be taken to the liturgies, to the prayers to be said at the different hours of each day. And you can either read them, you can download them, or you can play them right on your computer, and they sing the hymns and everything. So it's like you are praying with other people if you use that resource. Where is liturgy celebrated? Well, of course, Christ is the true temple, and by grace we become temples, living stones in the Church of Christ. But a human community requires visible structures in which to gather and to celebrate. So the normal place for the celebration of most of the sacraments is within a consecrated and approved church building. And there are many kinds of church buildings. And they're not just gathering places, although that's a very important function. But even by existing in a community, even by being there, everyone that passes a house of worship, be it a Christian church, a Muslim temple, a Jewish synagogue, everybody knows that there is some connection to God in this structure, that the people that enter there, the people that built it and that frequent it, are in some way praising the Creator, are some way acknowledging God in their lives, and going there for strength and for also to give their thanks and worship to God. They are not simply gathering places. They signify and make visible to the community, the church living in this place, the dwelling of God with men, reconciled and united with Christ. So in a sense, although they're not, of course, one of the 7 sacraments, but Vatican II kind of expanded for us the definition of sacrament, the church as an organization in the world, the physical churches as visible structures in a community, are sacraments of the presence of God in humanity. They are visible signs of an invisible reality. Within the Roman Catholic Church, that is, the church loyal and obedient to the Pope in Rome, there are many different liturgical traditions. The basics of liturgical ceremonies are the same, but some of the external ways of celebrating, including language, can be different. They express the culture of the people who celebrate them. They manifest the Catholicity, which is the universality of the Church, that the Church incorporates within herself many different cultures and kinds of people. They all express the same mystery. They are all faithful to the apostolic tradition, the truths handed down through the apostles. And they actually enrich each other. They make the universal church a richer entity. This graphic gives you some idea, actually a fairly complete idea, of what we mean by different Catholic liturgical rites. Like in here you see in it says branches of the Catholic Church. So let's say here's Rome and here's the Pope. In the West, what we call the Latin rites of the Church, there are all these different rites that are considered Catholic. They are fully in union with Rome, and the basic language in these rites, at least traditionally, was Latin. And these are called the Western rites of the Church. Some of them, like the Carmelites and the Dominican, are associated with particular religious orders. And then we have what are called the Eastern churches. Now, the Eastern churches in union with Rome are not the same as what are called the Eastern Orthodox churches, although their rituals appear very similar. These churches are loyal to Rome. The Orthodox churches are not. The traditional language of these rites is largely Greek. The largest of them is the Byzantine rite. But they also have many little rites in many other places that have developed, and they are all, any of us who belong to the Universal Catholic Church can attend services legitimately and receive sacraments in any of these churches. Now, as it says in the Catechism, there are the primary rites are the Latin, principally the Roman rite, and then the others, the Byzantine, Alexandrian, Syriac, Armenian, Maronite, and Chaldean rites. So you can walk into a church that is completely in union with the church that you belong to if you're a Roman Catholic, and yet the celebrations may look somewhat different. But if you go to a liturgy of the Eucharist, you still should recognize the penitential rite, the liturgy of the Word, the liturgy of the Eucharist. So what has all this got to do with our everyday life when we're not explicitly celebrating and praising God, which we should do with our lives anyway, but you're not always thinking about it? Well, by attending the liturgies, by receiving the sacraments, we receive grace from God and the strength to live a life in this world, which is not always sympathetic to our beliefs and our way of life and our moral values. The Church has a vital role in shaping moral, responsible citizens of all countries. In order to be a good practicing Christian, you need to be a good, moral, responsible citizen of your country. Every Mass ends by us being sent to go forth to serve God and our neighbor. And throughout the centuries, many saints and others have contributed greatly to many important human enterprises, including healthcare, education, and so forth. We are nourished by prayer and the sacraments to have the strength to live our lives. And if you look at the Bible, the way that we have it structured, Scripture begins with liturgy, really, because Adam, before his sin, spent his life praising God in every action. And the end of the Bible, the book of Revelation, ends with a heavenly liturgy, with a symbolic representation of the heavenly beings praising God with all their being. Now here's a quote from the Catholicism series, which by Father Barron, which is a good thing to be familiar with. And it'll give you something to think about. Some people don't like it. But what he says is, Aristotle said that the best activities are the most useless. In this sense, the most useless activity of all is the celebration of the liturgy, which is another way of saying it is the most important thing we could possibly do. Now, what he means by useless is this activity and some others are ends in themselves. We don't do it for another reason. Like, we'll go get a haircut because we want to look good. We'll go food shopping because we have to eat. We'll cook dinner because we have to eat. But we'll go to a ball game to have fun. There's no other reason to go. And we go to the liturgy to honor God, which is the most important thing we could possibly do.